Cubs are in big trouble, guys, and we're going to talk about that with Al Yellon from Bleed Cubbie Blue, plus a fantastic book, Chicago Cubs First. So we're going to get into that as well here on the Cubs Baseball channel. Like and subscribe. Get your comments in. We would love to hear from you guys and talk about the things and the questions that you guys have. So all that right here on the Cubs Baseball channel. We're jumping on a little early because we wanted to give you a little extra content. Let's get this thing going. All right, there he is, Al Yellon from Bleed Cubbie Blue, and our friend here on the channel. I'm at Broadcaster Mick. He's at Bleed Cubbie Blue. I'm at Broadcaster Mick on the socials. Al, great to see you. Before we even do anything, I got to get into this right now. I want to hit everybody hard out of the jump. Is it time to panic?
I don't know. This team is so flat right now. I mean, it feels like it would take a lot of energy to panic. So I don't know whether that's the right word to use or not.
6 games under 500 when we're recording right now. It's not even that there's 6 games under 500 that concerns me. It's like you said, I call it a dead fish. They play like a dead fish. It's the same game over and over and over again. It's a team that gets men on base, can't get the big hit, scores a couple runs, not enough. Starting pitching is fabulous, and that includes Kyle Hendricks, which I got to tell you, man, I did not see this coming, and I'm glad that I was wrong. I think he's back, and not many guys could have pulled it off, but we'll get into that a little later. Then the bullpen comes in, and the bullpen is a hot bag of poop.
Well, I mean, yeah, pretty much. I mean, all these blown saves after blown save after blown saves, 17 blown saves. There's only the White Sox have more blown saves, so that got to tell you something.
Yeah, they stink.
Convert even half of the blown saves, and then you've got a second place team that's in contention for the division title. Like you said, the starting pitching has been excellent, and the hitting with runners in scoring position hasn't worked. That was the case Monday. That game shouldn't have even been close. And then Tuesday, they couldn't get anybody on base. So, either there's too many runners that can't score or not enough runners at all. And I'm just, I'm not going to start ripping on Craig Counsell, but I have to say that I think that putting these same lineups out every day is crazy. You can't keep doing that every day and expect different results. Yes, often there's too much said about lineup construction, but I think in a skid like this, Joe Madden would have at least done something instead of just sending the same lineup out there every single day.
Yeah, you know what? Joe Madden probably would have gone to the minor leagues, looked at who's down there, and started to flip this roster a little bit because he believed in young players, and that's what he did in Tampa, and that's what he did with the Cubs when he was doing his thing. I thought when Joe Madden got too conservatives, like we stopped all the fun stuff, and then the team just was like, well, we're grown-ups now. We don't need to have, all the crazy people popping into the clubhouse. I say bring them in until you're out. I mean, we're all kids at heart. This team feels like it, like you said, it feels like it needs something. And I don't know. I mean, what are the answers? I mean, the star players just aren't playing like stars. I mean, you're lucky to get a single a night out of those guys. Happ's had some big games. I got to give him credit. He's really quiet, but then when he has his games, he carries the team to wins, right? And they haven't had many. And you look back at the ones they have had, and he's done some stuff. But outside of that, Bellinger and Suzuki are supposed to be the two guys, and they're just not. I mean, they're not having awful years, but they're not the guys.
I just don't think I've ever seen a Cubs team or maybe any baseball team where every single guy is playing below his career norms. I mean, everybody's in a slump, the whole team. And when I was talking about a Joe Madden-like shakeup, it's not necessarily the minor leagues. For a time when Madden was managing, team went into a slump, and all of a sudden he thought, well, I'm going to lead Anthony Rizzo off for a few games.
Yeah.
Unconventional choice. and it worked for a few games. So, why not just throw Pete Crow Armstrong into the leadoff spot, let him bunt his way on a few times. Maybe you could generate some offense in the first inning because, putting up those zeros in the first inning every single day is getting real tiresome. And, I don't know what Craig Counsell did when the Brewers went into slumps when he was managing there, but my goodness, you've got to do something to shake up this team and get them to, play up to their capabilities.
Let me ask you this. I thought that the team last year was going to be what it is this year. I looked at the roster at the beginning of the season and I thought, okay, this team's not going to be any good. And then they really weren't that good until the trade deadline. And I was kind of like, okay, I'm going to start this channel because they're going to make a bunch of trades. And then I can come in and tell you about all the players they're going to get back, or send away. Right. And then all of a sudden they got hot and they started winning games. And they did they did the Cubs way, we'll miss the opportunity to take advantage of the market, get to the end and lose, be one game out. And then now all of a sudden we've gone all in with this group and they stink again. Like they're back to being the team. Maybe they're just not that good.
Well, I think they actually are that good. Guys do go into slumps all the time. Like I said, it's just weird to see the entire team do this. And you have to remember also all these bullpen meltdowns that are happening. I mean, you've got 3 or 4 really good relief pitchers who are injured and out. And so, you're going to the 4th and 5th best guy. Last night's game probably wasn't going to be won anyway, trailing 2-1 entering the 8th. But why is Colton Brewer in this game? I mean, that's just like a generic reliever who's been around a few teams, hasn't done much. And he's only really here because Julian Merriweather is out, and Yency Almonte is out, and Adbert Alzolay is out. So, you think about all these guys being out, and this is one of the reasons that this team is not performing. It's the injuries. So, that's not really anybody's fault. Those things happen. But, there's no depth. The depth was tested, and it has failed.
Yeah. Well, you bring up another great point. This isn't the same team in the bullpen that Rossi had. Your 3 best relievers are all injured, right? Alzolay, Merriweather, and Leiter. And I mean, how many games last year did the Cubs rely on those 3 guys to get them there? I called it the A bullpen. They had the A bullpen and the B bullpen. And now they just have the B bullpen and the D or F bullpen, right? Depending on how you look at it.
Right. And that's what happened last September too, when Alzolay went out and they had to kind of shuffle around, and you had bullpen failures in September. And that's why they finished a game behind. I think it's, injuries you can't really do anything about. They happen in baseball, but you have to try and have some depth behind those guys. And right now they just don't have it.
All right. So who takes responsibility for this season if things don't turn around? Is it Craig Counsell? Is it Jed Hoyer, Carter Hawkins? Is it Tom Ricketts? Is it none of the above? Is it all the above? Because you're right. Injuries are playing a part in this. I mean, if they weren't injured, I mean, it wouldn't be like this, but somebody's going to take responsibility. Last year it was David Ross.
Well, I mean, people love to use Tom Ricketts as a scapegoat here, and because he apparently has chosen to not budget over the luxury tax level. But spending money is not necessarily always the way to get out of these issues. Look at the Mets, for example. They're still floundering, although they played better lately. Spend hundreds of millions of dollars on players, and there's nothing there. Same thing with the Angels. They've spent money over and over and over again, and always fail to do it. Money is not the answer. It's really it's talent evaluation, and that's right on Jed Hoyer. It's not necessarily not spending the money this year. Everybody was thrilled when Cody Bellinger decided to come back. Everybody was thrilled with the Shota Imanaga signing, which has looked really good. So those things have done. Hoyer talks about intelligent spending. He's done that pretty well. On the other hand, he's done some unintelligent spending, like why did they give 2 years to Tucker Barnhart last year? Why did they spend money on Trey Mancini when it looked like he was done? The year before, why did they spend money on guys who were done like Jonathan VR and then Drelton Simmons? Why did they let Jason Adam go when he was asking for less money than they gave Daniel Norris, who wound up being let go? So, it's kind of at the margins where they're spending money that they don't need to spend. And those dollars could have maybe bought better players.
Well, what do you think about like giving Dansby Swanson 7 years?
Well, I mean, that was the right thing to do. And of course, last year he had a very good year. Won a Gold Glove. Nobody really complained about Swanson last year, even though he was injured and missed some time. He was injured again this year and missed some time, came back without a rehab assignment. And you could tell that knee injury was still bothering him when he came back. He started to hit a little better, started to play a little better defense. I think in the end, he's going to wind up having essentially the year he had last year. And again, people said, well, the Cubs got to get one of those 4 shortstops. Well, they got one. And they spent the least money on any of the 4. None of the other guys are really having that great a season or did last year. So I don't have any problems with the Dansby Swanson signing.
What about Ian Happ? Here's a position where the Cubs are loaded in the minor leagues with depth. And they've got even some guys they got rid of. Jonathan Perlaza, Nelson Velasquez, who just got designated for assignment. But then you got Owen Casey, Pete Crow Armstrong, Kevin Alcantara, other guys. And then they sign Suzuki, and then they sign Happ, and then they sign Bellinger. So they've basically clogged up the outfield. But Happ's one that we kind of debate on this channel a lot because he has a no trade clause, and he has not been performing consistently. He's had some big games. If he didn't have big games, we wouldn't have any wins right now.
Well, Ian Happ has proven over the last couple of years he is who he is. He's a guy who's going to go into long slumps where you think, why is this guy even on this team? And people say, well, trade this guy. He's got a no trade clause. And why would you trade a guy when he's going badly? Nobody's going to want that. And then he goes on tremendous hot streaks. And in the end, his offensive numbers are going to be what they always are. He's going to win another Gold Glove. He's worth the money. Have they blocked somebody in the outfield? Possibly. And maybe you can use some of those guys in trades to get some pitching help.
And that brings me to my next question. It's almost like you read my lineup here of questions. Could trades fix this team?
Well, maybe. They could obviously use some bullpen help. Maybe they can find a reliever somewhere who's on one. And that's the other thing is that so many teams are in the wild card hunt that there aren't going to be many sellers. Well, at least not right now. I think that that might sort itself out. We're still 4 weeks or so away from the trade deadline. There may be some teams who will drop out of the hunt and might make some players available. So, yeah, maybe they can get some bullpen help. But, as far as hitting is concerned, the guys who are there can hit. We saw them hit last year. We saw what these guys can do. They're all hitting below their career averages. All you got to do is revert to the mean. And, that phrase is thrown around in baseball a lot, but it does happen and it does work. And every day you think eventually these guys are going to start hitting. These guys are going to start hitting. Mm-hmm. Maybe tonight is the day they start hitting.
Feels like every day we're kind of waiting around, and then every day we throw this up and we're further and further down, right? So the good thing is that the Cubs, you mentioned the wild card race, the only 2 teams that are out of it are the Marlins and the Rockies. But then when you look at the next team in the National League, it's the Cubs, and they're 4 games back, and they're 6 games under 500. Could they be a team that sells this year?
Well, here's the question I ask for you. First of all, if you look at those standings, they're 8.5 games above the Marlins and Rockies. So they're not really in danger of falling that far out of it. But the fact is, if they do, that's going to be because the players aren't performing. And if the players aren't performing, who are they going to trade? Like, who would trade for the Cubs hitters right now while they're not hitting? That's right.
Yeah, right. Well, then you trade the minor league guys, and that's what scares me. Honestly, like I feel like, and I like Jed Hoyer, and I agree with what you said. I think you nailed it on him. He could have gone out and signed maybe some more guys in the bullpen. Knew that the bullpen was an issue last year at the end of the season. Got Hector Neris, right, and then had some injuries and that hurt. But I thought he did a good job with the contracts. But, I feel like he's on the hot seat. I think if I'm Tom Ricketts, I'm going, you know what? We didn't make it last year. We didn't make it this year. It doesn't feel like the team's taking a step forward. It doesn't feel like the team's building for something. I look at this roster, and I just don't feel like the way that this roster is constructed right now, we're serious about winning a World Series. I don't feel like it was when Theo took over, and I'm watching. I see a wave of players coming up, but then they're getting to the big leagues, and they're not performing up to their standard. Chris Bryant didn't struggle like this. Javi Baez didn't struggle like this. All these guys struggle when they get to the big leagues, except the pitchers. right
Well,
now.
that's actually not true. Javi Baez did struggle when he first came to the major leagues. He had a terrible year and actually got sent back down. So he did struggle a bit. Even Chris Bryant struggled a bit. It took him almost a month before he did his first home run in the major leagues. But the guys who are currently in the system, they didn't absolutely dominate the minor leagues like Bryant and Kyle Schwarber did, for example. These guys all have good minor league numbers, but they didn't just blow away AAA like those two did. The only guy who did blow away AAA, who's currently on the Cubs roster, is Michael Busch. And Michael Busch is having a nice year that a lot of people don't recognize. He's hitting, he's playing good defense at first base. That's a keeper. They made a good trade there.
Yeah, look, I like Michael Busch, but maybe it's our expectations too. Maybe that when Chris Bryant and those guys came up, they could struggle because the team wasn't really expected to do a whole lot. So by the time 2015 got to about halfway through the season, we started to see those guys the light come on. And I think that Craig Counsell I don't blame Craig Counsell. I just don't. I know that I think he's done a good job of just trying to keep even keel, because a lot of us would be freaking out right now when you look at this roster and you go, man, these guys just can't perform. They're just not doing it. And when's it going to come on, right? I mean, when's Cody Bellinger going to, win some games for you? When's Seiya Suzuki going to get back to playing good baseball? You talk about Ian Happ. When's he going to get hot again? Christopher Morel, since he got hit on the foot in Atlanta, and I target that moment because I thought that was when he was going to turn it around. He had that 13 pitch at bat. He's been dreadful since then.
So, maybe it is that some of these guys are banged up and they're not talking about it and they're just trying to play through it, which isn't always the best way to do things. But in terms of Counsell, he's only playing the guys that the front office gives him. Mm-hmm. So, how much input he's had on certain players that have come to this team, you don't know. It's his first year. He wasn't allowed to bring any of his coaches from Milwaukee. That was part of the deal. They wanted to keep their guys, maybe. So he basically inherited a coaching staff, except for the bench coach, Ryan Flaherty, and you really don't hear much about him at all. So I don't know whether that coaching staff is going to do anything for him, or whether they need to make changes by next year. But I do think that you're going to see Craig Counsell, start to assert himself a little bit more. Right now, he's kind of, in a holding pattern in a way, because this team is not the one that maybe he might have wanted.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. And I look at this too and go, when you see a team struggling to hit like this, eventually the hitting coach is going to be fired. And I'm surprised every day that it hasn't happened. And I don't necessarily think it's the hitting coach's fault, but they can't fire the players, but then I guess it's a sign of panic. If the minute you fire somebody, you know what I mean? Like, what do you do?
Right. Well, I mean, there are some relievers in AAA who might be able to help this team more than the guys who are there. Daniel Palencia is coming back from an injury. I see some names on the screen. Ethan Roberts is coming back, and that would be a great comeback story if Ethan Roberts could come back and throw the way he was when he first came in the major league. Michael Arias doesn't have a lot of experience yet, but the guy throws 98, 99 miles an hour, and that's what we see. We see every other team coming to playing the Cubs. They got guys throwing 98, 99 miles an hour, and it's like the Cubs don't really have any guys like that, except for Palencia, when he can throw strikes. Except for Julian Merriweather, and he's injured. So, the rest of these guys are just, run-of-the-mill 94, 95 mile an hour guys. And it's kind of funny to say that because, a few years ago, 95 was something that most teams didn't do. But now, now everybody's got those guys. Why don't the Cubs have those guys? So if there's any indictment to made of Jed Hoyer, that's where it is, that they have not been able to identify and draft and or trade for and develop those kinds of pitchers. Maybe that's an issue with the pitch lab. Maybe it's an issue with Tommy Hotovy. All of this is going to have to be evaluated when the season is over.
Yeah. So, all right, let's try to fix this now. I'm going to run through the list of issues. First off, the catching position has been really bad. Nito, I mean, he's in there now. I haven't even had a chance to really decide whether he's good or not, but he's an upgrade from Gomes, right? You say Bush at first has had a good season. I agree with you on that. Nico has been Nico. I think it's been about what you expect. Dansby hasn't been good this year. Morrell hasn't been good lately. The outfield, we talked about them. The bullpen, the starting pitching has been great. So how do you fix this? How do you save this season?
I don't know how you suddenly get these guys to start hitting the way that they hit last year, but
Come on
that's
now,
really,
you know
really,
how to do it.
really the answer. I mean, if all these hitters who are all hitting, if you look at their OPS numbers, just almost every one of them is hitting 100 points below their career averages. Just do that, and you're going to score enough runs to win. Figure out ways to start hitting with runners on base. I mean, the runners in scoring position hitting on Monday, for example, was just awful. They led that game 4-2 going to the ninth inning. They should have been up by 5 or 6 runs in that game. So the situational hitting is not working. Is that another indictment of the coaching staff? I think that maybe, the hitting coach always gets too much blame when things go wrong and not enough credit when things go right. But, maybe you just fire the hitting coach just to make a statement.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Or do you go out and make trades just to try to change it? And then it feels like, well, are you making trades because you're trying to save your job in the front office? Or are you making trades because you think it's going to benefit the team, not just this year, but down the road when we were all sold on trading away the guys that helped win the World Series to build a wave and then get them to the big leagues? And I don't know. I mean, it doesn't really feel like that to me.
I mean, generally those trades were good trades. They got good players, and look at what those players have done since they left. The only mistake was letting Kyle Schwarber go for nothing. That's the thing they should not have done. Should have at least paid him the money that he could have gotten arbitration. If they had done that in 2021, one of two things would have happened. Either the team would have been better and maybe contended, and they wouldn't have had to sell off, or if they still played that way and sold off, they probably could have got more for trading Kyle Schwarber than they got for trading Jock Peterson, who they wound up paying almost as much money as Schwarber was asking in arbitration. So, that's the thing that they did do wrong. But otherwise, they got Pete Crow Armstrong in trade. So far, he's looked a little rough at the major league level. But the fact is that, he's only 22 years old. Maybe Craig Counsell should just put him in the leadoff spot and see what happens. Mm-hmm. I keep saying, how much worse could it be, right?
Yeah, and I guess that's the question. I mean, we're 6 games under 500 while we're recording this show. How much worse until you start to make drastic moves? How much more until you say, Happ, you're on the bench and Alexander Canario is coming up and he's going to play left field. And we're going to see if he can do it. How much longer until you say, hey, let's see, Dansby, buddy, you're going to be out this week and we're going to let Vasquez play over at shortstop and see if he can help spark our team. I'm just curious, when do we see Hunter Biggie like put on there? When do we give a guy like Frankie Scalzo Jr. an opportunity? When are we going to see Michael Arias? I'm just wondering, because at some point this team's either got to start winning or they need to start looking at options for next year and building. And I mean, we're all hopeful that there's another one of these dramatic turnarounds. But I feel like I'm holding my breath, and I'm about to.
It's not impossible, and you could have said this at this time last year too.
Oh yeah, I did.
Right, and it happened, and so that kind of thing happened. Could still happen. I wanted to address something, and if the viewer's still watching, the graphic somebody put up a graphic about having a 49-19 record.
Yeah.
If you're still watching, can you put that back up?
Yeah.
This is not correct. I actually wrote an article about this yesterday. And you can check Bleed Cubbie Blue about it. The 49-19 is only if all of the 16 blown saves had been turned into wins. And of course, 8 of those were actually turned into wins. So 49-19 is not actually right. But the key is not the key is about games after the 7th inning is that they had 11 games as of June 23rd that were tied after the 7th inning. They went 2-9 in those games. That's on the bullpen. That's where they really failed, is in the games that were tied. The bullpen either blew games or the offense didn't produce any runs, or both. So you take that 2-9 record, make it 6-5, even so even half of those losses. then you're talking about a team that could be in second place. That's
Right.
where that's where that really comes into play is in the tie games, not necessarily even the games they were leading.
All right. Brian says he disagrees. He thinks that Happ, Suzuki, Morel, Swanson, Bush, Amaya all need to go. Bullpen needs all new pitchers, and he doesn't see this team winning the World Series.
Well, I mean, of course, you can't trade all those players. And, Michael, like I said, Michael Bush is actually having a pretty good year. And all the rest of the players that are mentioned right there, every single one of them is having a worse year than he had a year ago. So, and all those players from a year ago, they were playing about at their career norms. Nobody had a freak year last year. They were all just playing up to their capabilities. And you just wonder, why can't they do that? It's it's not like these are bad players. They're just good players who are in slumps. It's sometimes you'll see a team that I'll have one or two of those guys in the slump at once. Just seeing an entire team do that for this long, I don't think I've ever seen anything like that.
Yeah, I don't either. Well, so what point do you decide that it's time to cut bait?
Well, like they were doing last year, they were very close to having a sell-off last year of whatever they could sell. And then, Dansby Swanson went in to talk to Jed Hoyer and said, don't sell off. We're going to start winning. And they started winning.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe they need to do, just take that attitude again and try that again. See if they can, just put on a run. I do think this team has it in them. It would be nice if it started like right now.
Yeah.
But they've got about 4 weeks till the trade deadline. And again, I'll say, if this team is playing this way, who are you going to trade? No, nobody has any trade value right now.
You know who they need? They need Ron Santo, and they need a brawl. You know what I'm saying? They need something to get this team going together and going again. Like Ronnie, the fire that he brought every day, the passion, they just don't feel like when I watch them, and I know they care, but they just don't play like they care.
Right. I mean, it feels that way, like they don't care. And it's just because the results on the field aren't happening. I just think that, fire is, to me, that sort of fire that you're talking about from years ago, it may be a little bit overrated. I think that, teams do care. These guys do care. The results hopefully will eventually come, and they'll get out of it. I don't know. They need to start some kind of bench clearing brawl, or have Craig Counsell, yell and scream at them. Now, what is that going to accomplish?
I don't know, but what they're doing right now isn't accomplishing anything but losing. And the point is, look at the Brewers. The Brewers, I see that roster, and I don't know how they're doing it. But look at them; they've had like 6 almost fights this year. Like they're constantly like they play with a chip on their shoulder. They don't have the players to be there, but they have the mentality to be there. And I'm not saying I want a bunch of guys to go out there and throw fists and stuff, but sometimes when you have a situation like this, you just need a spark. And I don't know what that spark is, but sparkless.
I know that this team has had multiple meetings, some with Craig Counsell, some without. Don't know that player-only meetings are going to accomplish anything. Sometimes it's just one game that'll light that spark. Like if they had won the game on Monday, after they had taken that lead and not blown yet another bullpen failure, maybe that would have started something. And these guys are human like everybody else. All these position players who are not hitting, they see the relief pitchers failing, and privately they got to be shaking their head like, what else can go wrong? Right.
That's right. All right, last one, and then we're going to talk about the book. All right. Did I hear that Pat Murphy was the hard-nosed guy on Craig's staff? I do believe that chemistry matters. I think that if you're kind of the guy that's over here, you're the good guy. You got to have somebody sometimes to be that guy. And I haven't heard that about Pat Murphy. But when Craig Counsell took over, he inherited a lot of guys. He did go out and get Flash, but he inherited a lot of other guys. He didn't get to pick a lot of his staff. Do you think that plays a part in this?
Well, and Pat Murphy, whether he's the hard-nosed guy or not, Pat Murphy and Craig Counsell go back a long way. Pat Murphy was Craig Counsell's college coach at Notre Dame. So those two guys have known each other for decades. And I wonder, I do wonder if Counsell misses something by not having Pat Murphy as his bench coach as he did in Milwaukee. They actually told him that if Murphy was not hired as Brewers manager, that could have happened, but they did hire him. So, maybe Counsell is missing something, the advice of a trusted advisor. And we kind of saw that with the Cubs when, Joe Madden had Dave Martinez with him for a long time. He'd had him in Tampa Bay for 8 years and brought him to Chicago as his bench coach. And then, Martinez got the job managing the Nationals. And, Madden seemed to have lost a little bit of his edge without Dave Martinez with him. So, bench coaches, nobody really, I won't say nobody knows what they do. They do have defined roles depending on what the manager wants them to do, but they're not overrated. I think that having a trusted advisor is important for a manager, and maybe Counsell doesn't have a guy like that right now.
Yeah, going to be interesting to see how this thing shakes out. And again, guys, thank you for getting in the comments section. Now let's kind of reverse gears. All of us Cubs fans like to talk about Cubs history. Al, you are an author, which I think is really cool. And your latest masterpiece is Chicago Cubs Firsts, the players, the moments, and the records that were the first in team history. I need my glasses, but what a cool cover. I like the book. We just saw Rhino get his statue. You got Billy Williams on there. I mean, that's Ernie Banks on there. So fantastic.
I think this was kind of a labor of love. The publisher came to me with this concept. The publisher is actually doing a series of these books. They're doing Cubs, Yankees, Red Sox, and Mets. So I was honored to be picked to do this Cubs book. A lot of fun to delve into first. And Rhino and Ernie are on the cover. They are players who have done things first in Cubs history, but also part of the book that's fun is I learned about players who maybe you've never heard of before. Guys from the 19th century, because the Cubs franchise goes back to 1876. So a lot of firsts in Cub history go back to them. I'll talk about a guy named Ross Barnes, who probably many people have not heard of. He was on the very first Cubs team in 1876. And so he recorded the first hit in Cubs history. And one of the things about Ross Barnes that was kind of cool, and he forced a rule change, because in the very first year of the National League in 1876, they had a rule called the fair foul rule. And what that said is that if a ball bounced into foul territory and then bounced back fair, it was a fair ball.
Really?
And yes. And so Barnes got really good at doing this, and he hit 429 that year.
Wow.
So he was too good for the league. So they changed the rule after that to like the rule we have now. And Barnes' batting average fell off, but he had that one great year for the Cubs. And so I thought he was worth remembering in the book.
So was it like if you hit the sidewall and it bounced back in, it was a fair ball?
Yeah, it was a fair ball. Right. So, that again, this is like, 160, 150 years ago.
Yeah.
So they were still trying to, work things out. A lot of rules got changed over the course of time. And that was one that they had changed. Remember, in 1876, the pitcher didn't stand on a mound. He stood in a box that was not 60 feet from home plate. It was 50 feet. And the hitter could ask for a pitch, like he could ask for a high pitch or a low pitch. And, this is something we don't have in baseball today, but back then that was part of the rules. And over time, they determined that, this isn't really good baseball, and they decided to change this.
Yeah, that's crazy. Tell us some other stories. Everybody loves Ron Santo. Did you get any good Santo stories?
For the book, Santo is not really a big part of this book, but, he did participate in one interesting Cubs first, because back then, back in the 1960s, without lights, the Cubs often played tie games because they got called for darkness. So Santo and Billy Williams both played in 164 games in 1965 because they played in every game and there were 2 ties. Of course, no one will ever do that again because, guys just don't play that many games.
Yeah.
And we don't really have there's only one specific way you can even have a tie game today. In fact, the Cubs were involved in what is the most recent tie game in the major leagues. It was in 2016. The only way you can have a tie game now is if it's the last game between 2 teams in 1 year. It gets stopped by rain when it's tied, and the game has no impact on the postseason. So they had one of those games against Pittsburgh in the last week of the 2016 season. It was in Pittsburgh. They were tied 1-1. It rained. They couldn't finish. And they, the Pirates were way out of it, and the Cubs had already clinched, so that was the last tie. We were talking about first here. That's the most recent tie for any major league team. The one thing that I think I'm most proud of in this book is that anybody who reads the book will find out the very first date the famous W flag first flew above the Wrigley Field scoreboard. When I was doing research for this book, everything that I read about the W flag said, well, we don't know when the first date was. And I thought, well, that's a challenge. I want to find out when this was. So I found a series of photos that help prove the first date. And I'm not going to tell you here what it is, of course. You'll have to read the book.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, so you did some research like that. How do you figure that out? You going back and watching games and stuff?
Some is from video. Some is just from looking at baseballreference.com, which is just an amazing resource of baseball history. And some is from personal experience, having been at certain games and remembering them and keeping scorecards and all that. So there's just a lot of different ways of researching Cubs history.
Yeah. So how long did it take you to put this together?
The publisher first came to me in August of 22, and the deadline was at the end of last year. So it was almost a year and a half worth of research, which was great because they gave me, enough time to really put all these things together. And, I have to also credit and give some credit to the guys who did the Yankees and Red Sox books, because I was a little struggling at first trying to put together an organized outline for this. And the publisher put me in touch with the writers for those two books, and they were really helpful in helping me organize everything.
So when you start a project like this, where do you start?
Well, that's the thing. First of all, the publisher and the editor tells you what they want, and then you have to try and outline what you're doing. And like I said, the Yankees and Red Sox guys were very helpful in helping me organize those kinds of things. It's also just kind of thinking about Cubs history and thinking about, just the long stretch of history of the game and of the team, and, where you want to take it. The book is formatted in kind of a trivia question format. So in other words, for each one of these, first you pose a trivia question, give the answer, and then, tell a story about the answer, about the player. This is organized in players, coaches, all-star games, awards. First about Wrigley Field, like the W flag thing. So that's kind of how it's organized in those sections.
Yeah.
So people can just, it's not a book you necessarily read. It doesn't have a plot, really. You don't have to read it cover to cover in that way. You can kind of jump around and pick, if you want to read about certain players or managers or all-star games or Wrigley Field, just kind of pick what you're interested in and start from there.
What I like about this book and other books like it is I travel a lot. You guys know that. I'm constantly on the road going from one place to the next. And when I get somebody in the car with me, I'll pull it out. You can just, because the anecdotes are small, you can say they can read it, or they can ask me after they read it what I think the answer is going to be, and then tell me the answer. So I like to sit there and, like you said, like the kind of the trivia thing. Hey, when do you think the first day that the W flag flew? It's pretty fun to try to figure that out.
Right, exactly. So that that's what I kind of how I approach this. It's fun to learn these things. Some of which I knew before I started, some of which I learned as I went along.
Well, before we get off here, tell anybody that's listening right now anything that we didn't hit on that you want to talk about with the book, and how they can get it, I guess, too.
I think that, I think you've pretty much covered, everything. That it's just kind of a fun book about Cubs history. And it goes, if I had done every Cubs first that was really the first, it would all have been from the 19th century, because that's when the Cub theme first started. But, I didn't want to do that. I wanted to hit all the eras. So there's Cubs first from the 19th century, and there's actually one as recent as last year. So that's the kind of thing. It runs the whole gamut of almost 160 years of team history. You can get the books anywhere you buy books, bookstores, and I do encourage people to support their local independent bookstores, because that's really kind of the lifeblood of any community. Or Amazon, which you can get any book you want. So anywhere you buy books is the place to find this book.
Awesome, man. Well, I'm looking forward to checking it out. Now, always great to get with you, and you're such a steady hand when it comes to covering the Cubs. A lot of us like to panic, and you just seem like, but you're behind the helm. You just like steady ship.
One of the things that's great about baseball is that, even if after you have bad games like the last two games. There's another game the next day. Maybe the winning streak starts today. That's,
Yeah.
I've always been kind of an optimist that way. Maybe it'll happen.
Well, when you're ready to like give up on the season, I want you to come back because I can't wait to. I can't wait.
I'm
to
hoping
hear
that
what
that
you
point
say.
doesn't come, but we'll see.
Me too. Me too. I mean, it's a lot more fun to talk about a team that's winning than a team that's losing every day.
No doubt.
All right. Well, that's Al Yellon. You can check him out every day on Bleed Cubbie Blue. They do a great job. Al, good luck with book sales. You guys go out and buy the book, and and like you said, support the local bookstores. I think we all have one in our town, but you can also get it at Amazon and the big guys as well. So check it out. And again, I'm going to put it up there on the screen for you guys one more time so you can see it. But it's called Chicago Cubs Firsts. Very cool cover. Be a great gift. And again, thanks everyone for hanging out. All right, Ant will be taking care of the post-game show late tonight when the Cubs hopefully beat the Giants. Thank all of you guys for being part of it, and we will talk to you again really soon. Go Cubs.